Hello everyone, my name is Intan Paramadita. I am a senior lecturer in Media and Film Studies at the Department of MCCALL, or Media Communications, Creative Arts, Language and Literature, Macquarie University. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the Macquarie University land, the Watamatagal clan of the Darug Nation, whose cultures and customs have nurtured and continue to nurture this land since the dream time. I pay my respect to elders, past, present, and future. Welcome back to MCCALL Voices, live on campus. This is part of the Faculty of Arts Welcome Back to Campus program. I am here to introduce our host. Annie Paterson is in her final undergraduate year at Macquarie University, and she is studying a Bachelor of Arts English and Bachelor of Science Paleobiology. While studying at Macquarie University, Annie has twice received the Barbara Knox Prize for Literature. She has achieved academic placement on the Macquarie University Merit List and obtained several Highest Achiever in a Unit of Study awards. Annie's passion lies in academia, and her goal is to work in the field of English literature in both research and teaching capacities. So welcome, Annie. The stage is yours.
Hello everyone, welcome to MCCALL Voices. This event is a collaboration between MCCALL Voices and the Faculty of Arts Welcome Back to Campus program. Now, MCCALL Voices is a series of interviews with students and alumni who came to Macquarie to study media, communications, music, performing arts, entertainment industries, literature and creative writing, as well as diverse languages and cultures. And this is the place to connect and learn more about our speakers' career trajectories and their classes and gigs, and also various yellow brick roads and whatever magic tricks we might have tucked up our sleeves, because I'm sure there are several on board right now. But MCCALL Voices actually started in 2021 as a series of live interviews on Instagram with students during lockdown. But now that we're back on campus, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome the MCCALL Voices back to campus live. Now, this conversation will be recorded, and if you cannot join us today, you will be able to access the recording on the MCCALL YouTube channel, which is MCCALL at Macquarie University. Alternatively, you can also follow MCCALL on Instagram at MCCALL_MQ. Now, today, for our live on campus panel, I am very excited to welcome Brooke and Neilab. Brooke Linnegar is a trans woman who completed her Bachelor of Arts in 2021, with a major in screen practice and production. Congratulations.
Thank you.
She's currently a first-year Bachelor of Philosophy, Masters of Research candidate with a research interest in screen production and how attitudes towards authorship, control, and acting impact the way that we make films. Outside of university, Brooke enjoys experimenting with documentary forms and ways that we can queer its knowledge production. Welcome, Brooke.
Thank you.
Now, Neilab, Osman, on the other hand, is a 22-year-old merit scholar studying sociology and media, culture, and communications, and is very nearly done with it, so congratulations in advance. In her work, she is a bilingual student learning support officer with the New South Wales DET. She's also a LEAP project assistant with refugee mentoring at Macquarie University, a youth advisor with Are You OK?, a policy intern with the Australian Human Rights Commission Children's Department, a refugee advocate, and a human rights enthusiast. In mid-2022, I'm apparently about 20 years behind where we are at the moment, she will begin a Master's in Public and Social Policy at Macquarie University. Welcome, Neilab.
Thank you.
So now that we've had our formal introductions and we've all gotten to know a little bit about ourselves and each other, I think I'd like to start with what drew you to Macquarie University and MCCALL specifically. So what drew you to your studies, and are there any, what highlights have you experienced studying what you have studied, and if there are any stories that you'd like to share? This is a bit of a big one, we're starting with the good stuff. So let's start with Brooke.
So I didn't start off in MCCALL. I came to Macquarie in 2017 studying ancient languages. So I was really drawn to our ancient history program. But then I kind of got tired of our ways of knowledge production in more written forms and became really interested in creative essay and documentary. So around the same time that I took a year off to just focus on transitioning, I also switched over and did a few screenwriting units.
Yeah.
Loved it, and then just fully switched my degree into screen production and just haven't looked back. It has been just the most fun I've had learning ever.
Fabulous. Fabulous. So I guess you had the call to MCCALL and you answered that call. And I'm so glad that this is where you are at the moment, because you can see just watching you talk about it that you are genuinely so excited about what you're studying, which is absolutely fabulous. So I actually might take this chance to direct over to Neilab. What drew you to MCCALL?
I was similar to Brooke in that I started in like a very different degree to where I am now. So I finished as any old sort of like, high school graduate, I had no idea what I wanted to do. They sort of give you your UAC book and say, pick your top 5. And I was like, that sounds cool, that sounds cool, that sounds cool. So I started out in law and psych honours. I was in the course for like 4 weeks before I decided to defer. And then I was trying to find myself, which didn't really, I don't think finding yourself like when you're not doing anything really works. But I went back and I did sociology and law, and I loved sociology, and then I realised law wasn't really for me. And then at the time I was a teacher's aide, and I still am a teacher's aide, just in like a different capacity. And I picked up education instead. So I did sociology, media, culture, communication, and education. And then I decided to just drop that education part and go into public policy instead, because I realised I really just want to work in the children and young people space, and I'll probably go back to teaching one day. I always say that, but I'm going to try all this stuff out first, and I'm sort of just going with the flow. That's my whole thing.
And I think that's very accurate what you said. As soon as you move out of high school, there is this expectation that you will choose the correct university degree straight off the bat, because even when you're considering early entry programs, for example, in high school, which is what I did, I had to know what I wanted to apply to. Now, I think that it's really important to hear stories about people who change their degrees, because it's not like, oh, I've picked a degree, I've set this in stone, I got the ATAR for this one, therefore I have to study this. I think that the fluidity and the space for creativity within a department that is as broad as MCCALL, I mean, we are covering media, languages, performing arts, literature. There's a very, very broad space, and I think that it's nice to see some mobility within that space as well. But again, I can see how excited you are to be talking about what you're studying now. So I mean, how many years did it take you to be here studying what you love, Brooke?
It took me about 2 years of studying something that I enjoyed, but wasn't something that I could sustainably do as a career. It took me 2 years and a lot of extremely hard self-reflection that wasn't just about uni, to think, wait, where is it that I actually want to go, and what will I be able to spend the next however long of my life doing?
Yeah. So, about 2-ish years, but with an essential thought process that happened at the end of that. So you said that you were studying for about 4 weeks before you realized you wanted to defer. Would you say that that was kind of the bulk of the time that you spent questioning, or was there a bit of time after that you also were kind of, I'm not sure. How much time do you think it took for you to realize that this is where you want to be?
To be honest, I still say I'm still always like, what am I doing? I feel like we're all kind of just faking it, like, faking it till we make it. And it's sort of like, I'm very open to like things coming up, or like my idea of like a career changing, because they say like you have 7 careers or something, in this day and age, you might have 7 on average. So I'm totally open to like shifting around, pivoting around, as long as it sticks to my core values, because that was a big thing that campus wellbeing, actually shout out to campus wellbeing, because I also I struggle with like mental health and like anxiety and things like that as well. And so it took a lot of like like working out my mental health and things like that as well, and just kind of accepting that like it's all right, if things change and if you decide you want to do something else, or if it's like you decide you want to move in a different direction, and uni's always around, you can go and retrain into something else. And so that was my sort of thought process, because there's no right answer to things like this, so it's just sort of kind of where you are, and
Correct. And I think that something that's come up for both of you already, and something that I can also identify with in my studies, is that idea of returning to your core values, like stepping back and thinking, what do I actually want to do? Maybe I want to be comfortable with the fact that I'm not sure what I want to do, and this is just what I want to do right now, and I'm going to pursue that. Or maybe you find out that there is actually a career path for you that wasn't what you thought it was going to be originally. Because I had a slightly different call to MCCALL, if you will. I selected my double university degree in year 11, essentially, and when I know that I am passionate about two things. I'm passionate about science and I'm passionate about arts. And when I started at university, a lot of the discourse that I had with myself was about career. I thought, I'm studying the science because I know, well, I'm passionate about it for starters, but I know that that's what's going to get me the job, and I'm studying my arts because, quote unquote, I didn't want to leave English in high school. So when I started university, I was relatively sure that I was in the degree that I wanted, and I haven't changed that degree, but I've changed my approach to it. Because I got to about the end of my second year of study. I think 2 years is a bit of a magic period. You're 2 years into your study, and I was reflecting on where I'd gone with my degree. Also, end of second year, we were fully in lockdown because that was 2020, and lockdown and navigating that does a lot for self-reflection and returning to core values. But I realized that I still wanted to study both of my science and my arts, but that my heart wasn't in the science as a career. My heart was in the science as an interest. And a long-standing interest, but an interest nonetheless. And I realized that I was actually very passionate about pursuing my arts, my literature, my academia to a professional level. Now, when I came to that realization, that was surprisingly difficult, because you're often fed the idea that if you want to study arts, the big umbrella term, but if you want to study arts instead of science or business or law or anything like that, that you're somehow choosing a less worthy or a less valid career path, and that the creative or liberal arts are somewhat less viable career opportunities. So as someone who wants to go into academia, I'm constantly fed that idea that, I tell people about my degree and they're, oh yeah, the science, totally. Oh, and your arts too, that's also really interesting. But I guess I wanted to touch on the idea of passion driving career. And have you ever faced backlash, whether that was just like from within yourself questioning your choice, or whether that was from other people, and how you negotiated that? Because I think in a department that deals with creative and liberal arts, realistically, not everyone's going to understand why you want to pursue that career path. So, Brooke, did you ever face any backlash from making your decision, from yourself or others?
Oh, absolutely, for myself, so much, because especially with creative fields, it's internalized so hard that only the top few people are going to make it, it's a tough industry to crack into, just all of that sort of stuff that just seems really hard about getting a career in a creative field. But kind of the way that I worked through that was I just gave it my all in all of my classes, and you learn so much that even if you're not going to get one of those big careers, there are lots of other ways that you can take this creativity, especially with the way that everything's working now with media. So you do it and you love audio. There's so many opportunities to do audio. There's so many more videography opportunities, but also just in the creative aspect as well, just working really hard and just seeing opportunities present themselves to you. It really gets rid of a lot of that sense of kind of imposter syndrome, both in am I good enough, and then if I'm not good enough, I can't get a job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Now, Neilab, have you faced any backlash, again, from yourself or from other people? Because I think you made a really good point about imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
It's absolutely rife. But have you experienced that and potentially other things?
Yeah, I personally, like, I come from, like, an immigrant background. So, like, my parents, they're Afghan. And so I did really well in high school and law psych. And then when I sort of approached my parents and went, oh, I think I want to do primary teaching instead, it was, like, a huge shock to them. And I think a lot of maybe immigrant background students would probably feel the same way. They feel sort of pressured. My parents would always be like, okay, so engineering, law, or medicine. It's sort of like, that's the three.
The trifecta.
The three things that, and I went with the law and didn't like it.
Yeah.
But I also sort of, for me, it was more so, I knew I liked sort of like policy, government, social change, social justice. I knew I liked all of those things. And so I was like, I feel like I can meet these without doing law, because I think a lot of people who are sort of like humanitarian and all that sort of stuff, the first thing they think is like a double arts law degree or like an arts, law something, law social justice. And I think I tried to, for me it was like contract law and things like that just didn't really resonate.
Yeah.
So I'm still touching on things with law and things like that, and even in my internship. But a lot of people that didn't have law degrees in public policy, I think, and that took, seeing, going on LinkedIn and seeing what like other people were doing and how they got there to the dream, like my dream jobs and stuff. And it was like people did all sorts of things in order to get there. There is no like correct equation to it. And so that sort of helped me with like my imposter syndrome and things like that too. And I still can't say that I've overcome imposter syndrome. Like you sort of wake up and you go, like, why am I doing this? Or why have they given me this responsibility? But you sort of just like, I guess, try your best and sort of see like what happens with it. So I'm sort of, I think, it took a long time and I'm still sort of working towards it. So
But I think, interestingly, both of you in answering that question about how you responded to backlash, whether it was internalized, so in terms of imposter syndrome, or whether from managing other people's expectations of what you were supposed to do with your studies, both of you have touched on the idea of just giving it your all, just throwing yourself into it, acknowledging that you're passionate about something and allowing yourself to pursue that passion. And I think that is essential, and I agree, to overcoming that feeling that you shouldn't be where you are because somehow it's less correct, or there's an alternative option that would be that would look better, or something like that. I think that I went through a similar process when I realized, actually, I care about my literature and my academics in more than just an interest sense. I'm so passionate about understanding the interconnectedness between texts and writers and readers, and how things like genre, for example, can mimic can provide a recognizable form of culture that then is able to evolve over time as what readers are expecting from texts evolves, then what writers will write about evolves, and in turn the text evolves. So it's still a text, well, for example, it's still a piece of romance fiction, or it's still a piece of horror fiction, or it's still a piece of science fiction, but it is evolving with culture. Now, to look at something like literature, just to use a very personal example, is something that's often written off as being, oh, you like to read, well, good for you. Or, oh, you liked English in high school, oh, that's cute. And it's not really considered because you're told that there's no opportunities, or only a select few people are actually going to be able to enter into that sphere, can really deter you from pursuing something that feels like a niche, especially a small niche, even if it's not realistically that small. And the way that I came to terms with that was, no, I know that I am passionate about this, and I know that if I want this to work, if I want to teach, if I want to research, I will find a way, because I know that when push comes to shove, I will shove back with my arts. I was in a situation on an excursion for one of my science units, and push was coming to shove and I didn't feel like shoving. And I'm sitting there and going, I could just give up. That's when you know that that's not where you're supposed to be in the long term. So touching on that idea of throwing yourself into it and just acknowledging that you have passion and trusting yourself to know what to do with that, I want to go back to something that you brought up about learning and being passionate in your learning. I think that especially for first year students, although to be honest, I know third, fourth year undergraduate students, and I'm sure you know BPhil students who still struggle with this, the idea that class is not just a space where you passively consume information and then take it home and do your notes and then submit your assignments, that there is something more to be taken from especially the tutorial and the discussion class. So Brooke, I'm going to swing over to you now. What insight can you give beginner but also more experienced students about how to make the most of, say, a tutorial class?
Yeah. So especially in a creative area, like in your screen production tutorials and things like that, it's more than just learning whether that's theory or practical skills. It's also a networking space. So for example, when I'm learning my screen production stuff and we're going through, I'm paying attention to who's asking what questions and putting forward my best self, because this is my first group of colleagues. Like, because I've had a few things where I've had an opportunity to go on and take a role in a production, and they've been like, oh, we also need a cinematographer, we also need someone to do sound recording, we also need this. And the only people I knew were the people from my classes, and it was the people who engaged in tutorials, who, when we had Zoom classes, who had their cameras on, so I could actually remember who they were. And just treating tutorials, and even if you're just looking to go not in like a creative industry sense, but just an academia sense, these are the people who will be reading your writing, will be reading your drafts, whose research seminars you'll be going to. So it's a really good opportunity to more than just learn, but to advertise yourself as someone worth working with, someone who deserves opportunities if they come up, whether it's something the lecturer has available and like, I need a student, you want to be at the top of their list when they're thinking, oh, who should I email about this? And you want to be like with all the other students as well. So that's, if you're in an online class, have your camera on and engage with the lecturers and the tutors and the students. And if you're in person, just try to say at least something. It doesn't have to be an answer to a question. It can just be asserting something you don't understand and showing that you're willing to learn and build, because that's the stuff that people remember, and you want to be remembered so that people can offer you things.
Correct. I think a really interesting point that you touched on quite early there was that your class is more than just your learning community. They're your first colleagues. They're your first co-workers. They're your first professional community, as well as your undergraduate or postgraduate community. And I think that, yes, being able to demonstrate a willingness to learn beyond just, oh, I'm here, therefore that means that I'm interested in learning. It's, oh, I'm not sure if I understand something, so I am actually going to ask. And I know that especially transitioning from high school to university, the space that you occupy as a student changes a lot. When you're in high school, you're with the same bunch of people 5 days a week, sometimes more if you do extracurricular stuff. And the physical space that you're occupying is a lot more structured. It's a lot easier to just reach out and access people because you're likely to bump into them in the hallway. When you transition to university, campus is expansive. There's no guarantee that you're going to run into someone that you know, just on the off chance that you both happen to be on campus on the same day. And the same thing goes not just with friends and acquaintances, but with professors and lecturers and tutors. So if you have knowledge missing that you want to fill, I guess, that you want to make not missing, and you have a question that you want to ask or something that you want to clarify, it does require you to reach out to your academics and to your professors, because as welcoming and as accommodating as academics and professors can be, they're not going to know if you need help unless you bring it to their attention. So I know that for me personally, last year and the first half of the year before, which was the era of the Zoom tutorial, I found that I was able to get more out of my classes when I turned my camera on, when I was maintaining the virtual equivalent of eye contact with my tutor, but also being able to just go, oh, I've got an assignment and I know I want to do well and I know that I want to learn as much as I can, but there's just something that's not sticking and, the lecture didn't cut it or we didn't talk about it in tutorials and Google isn't helping me because it's all jargon and I can't pick it apart. But even if you don't have to get to that stage, if you just realize that your tutors and academics are tutors and academics because they are deeply knowledgeable and deeply passionate about their areas of focus, being able to send that email to say, oh, look, can we just hop on Zoom? I've got a question about the assignment, or now that we're back in person, look, can I drop by our office at X time on X day and just, or maybe just to initiate an email thread to clarify something, not only means that you're getting the most out of your studies, but that your tutors recognize you. They begin to develop rapport with you, and also you take on an identity other than just, oh, they're a student in my class. They're the student in my class whose camera was on Zoom, who was putting their hand up answering questions, who was chiming in tutorials, maybe not necessarily verbatim answering my question, but moving off what other people had said in the environment and proving that they have something to contribute. It doesn't have to be groundbreaking knowledge. You don't have to be, articulating theses every time you open your mouth. But opening your mouth is the most important first step. So I completely agree. It's not just about, oh, I'm here, therefore I want to learn. It's about being known and being recognized and building that connection with people who will then be able to expand your connections if they know that you're someone that they can call on. So I think that that's really, really valuable insight, especially in an area such as media where you have crews of people that need filling and you want to be one of those people whose, name is on the quick up drawer for, oh, I need someone. Well, I know Brooke had her camera on in class and I know that she's always talking, so she's probably going to be useful to me. Exactly right. Now, Neilab, I pass it over to you. Whether it's in online tutorials or in in-person tutorials or in other environments where you're just expected to discuss things or contribute, how would you make the most of that environment?
For me, I'm similar to Brooke as well. Like, I was always like, I'm the one that shows up to those tutorials even like the last week when like everyone kind of drops off and things like that. But for me, I was always, in high school, in year 12, they do the high school awards, and I was really good friends with a lot of my teachers because I used to go out of my way and ask them, and I got the Teacher's Pet Award. So in some ways, for year 12, so yeah, shout out to year 12, Riverside Girls High. But basically, for me, it's always like, when I look at like a tutor or a professor, it's like that person is an expert in like the area that you probably are interested in, and they 99% of the time they want to help you, and like they get keen when you ask them a question in their area as well. They just like, I've had the other day I had a call with Terry Send from social media. I'm doing her unit, and I just wanted to talk about an assignment. I had an idea, and the call, she went way over her consult. We spoke for like an hour and a half, and I got so much out of it. And like they were turning the lights off in the uni, and she's like, I'm gonna go. And so I like got out of that, and it was just like a 5-minute conversation. It could have been, but she's so passionate about that area, and so we just sort of like, and we spoke about all sorts of things, and so you get a lot out of it. And also, like Brooke said, they remember you. Like I've done units with past conveners who go, oh, I remember you, and they sort of offer you things as well. Like Joseph in the MCALL faculty, I did forensic media with him, and I'm an Afghan background, so when Afghanistan fell, he sort of reached out and was like, I know like you're going through it, so like, well, I'm going to remove all your deadlines and you just do it as you go. And so I don't think if I was just a student number and he didn't know who I was, I don't think he would have done that, and I probably wouldn't have reached out either. So he, in being kind of known as a student, not so much just a number, it sort of works to your advantage as well. And in tutorials you can make friends as well. Like I have some of my best friends today are people I met in tutorials, and we did internships together, and like we work together and get it, they're your network, as you say, you network with them as well. And even with my postgrad, I wouldn't have considered doing public and social policy if Professor Sean Wilson didn't go, hey, you're actually really good at this, like you should consider it. So I think it's good to just talk, even if it's a silly question, like just say anything, even if it's drawing on your own personal background and being like, oh, like I had a similar experience. They appreciate it, and they just want you to learn. So I think just treating it as like a space, like a safe space, is also important as well.
I think it's also really valuable that you brought up that contributing and thereby being known and assuming an identity with your tutor is more important than just for your academic career, but also for your well-being.
Yeah.
Because like you said, if you had just been a name on a list of names or a number in a list of numbers, then your tutor wouldn't have known to reach out to you in a time of personal crisis. Now, I'm not saying that everybody's tutor is going to have like 30/20 vision like that, but it's just, it's an option that wouldn't have been there otherwise. And also the fact that somebody else was able to suggest a possible further study path that you hadn't considered. Again, professional insight into an area is not just for academics, as in like, oh, I can tell you how to do the assignment, or I can tell you how to understand the reading, but it's, I can suggest ways that you can grow and improve in this area, because if they see that you're passionate, they're not going to go, oh, okay, well, that's great for you. I'm going to go and at least set you free on your own way. They're going to want to guide you. Academics and professors are mentors.
Exactly,
And I think you really tap into that when you lay a good foundation by introducing yourself, contributing, putting your hand up, making yourself known, making yourself seen. So I think absolutely fabulous insight from both you, and very, very valuable to how to make the most of the classroom environment. Now, speaking of the classroom, units and classes that you've done as part of your studies that have really stood out to you as being just fun. Like, they don't necessarily have to be earth-shatteringly revolutionary, just, oh, I enjoyed it and you would too. Or perhaps there are some earth-shattering revolutionaries somewhere in here. Unit recommendations from your degree, Brooke.
I mean, the screen production units have been extremely fun for me, even though we haven't necessarily been able to make films for all of them because we've been in lockdown. But the ones where we have been able to get our hands on equipment and go on and make films, it's been some of the most meaningful learning that I've done. And just getting that experience that feels somewhere between academic training and also like trade school learning. And it's just like learning these things that I can now take into my other passions, especially with screen production, because that, like, it's inherently interdisciplinary. It can just be applied to all my other stuff. It just gave me a whole new way of thinking and looking at everything, and that was just so meaningful for me. And also how I wrote my essays. Like, I did my documentary unit, and I learned about writing documentaries, about interviewing, about editing them, about creating that story. And then I could take that into some undergrad gender studies units I was doing. I'm like, oh, I have this essay. Why don't I try writing it as an autoethnography and treating it in this way that I wouldn't have even thought of if I didn't have this experience with the more creative type of knowledge creation.
I think the idea of knowledge being interdisciplinary inherently is actually very interesting and something that I've experienced a lot as well. Studying a science arts degree and with majors that are as dichotomous as English literature and paleobiology, you tell people that and they go, okay, those are two different decisions. You know, if that was a Venn diagram, they'd just be two separate circles, no overlap. But in reality, there is actually a lot of overlap between units within the same discipline, but also between units in completely different disciplines. And interesting that you should bring up essays, because that's also where I felt that a lot of the interdisciplinary knowledge is located, because the skills that I learned in my English literature classes about how to critically analyze a source and evaluate evidence and articulate an argument that's based on something a bit more abstract than a series of numbers was critical to my ability to write scientific papers. Now, in science, you do actually deal with a lot of numbers, but there are times where you don't. And I know that there was one particular situation where I was in where the assignment was a science essay, not a scientific paper, not an introduction, method, results, discussion kind of dissection. No. They gave us an abstract idea and they wanted us to analyze it from a scientific perspective, and most of my cohort was immediately out of their depth. How do you write a science essay? We haven't been taught this. But the skill that I'd learned from my English units was immediately transferable into that. I was in my comfort zone. I churned out that essay. I loved it. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be as transferable from arts to science, but when you do units that give you practical skills, critical thinking skills, creative skills, you don't just keep your creative skills inside your little creative bubble. Just in the same way that you don't keep your English lit academic analyzing skills inside your little English lit bubble. you'd be surprised how much is transferable. So do creative units, not because, oh, I'm studying something creative and I know that I need this for my degree, although that is a good motivating factor. If you have an interest in doing something, do it because you'll love it and you'll get something out of it that may be surprisingly applicable in other areas. So I think that's a really, really interesting point about units, especially creative ones. Now, Neilab, do you have any unit recommendations from your studies?
I've done like units in like so many different faculties, like education, sociology, law, media, culture studies, like all different types of units. And it's interesting, yeah, like you said, there are so many like different ways of looking at the same concept. Like you might look at race or gender or things like that, and there's really like you see it through different lenses. And at one point I was doing an education unit, a sociology unit, and a culture studies unit, and they were all looking at the same things each week. Like I looked at, it was like the sort of like the sociology of education by the education department, introduction to sociology, and Ian Collins's unit, living culture. And each week they were actually all looking at gender at the same time. They were all looking at race at the same time. And for me, it was just like, it wasn't repetitive at all. I was looking at these things like in a different way each time. And it was really interesting just to see like the different disciplines and like hearing about the different ways they look at it. And so for me personally, because I want to go into something like public policy or potentially teaching, nothing I learn is a waste at all. Like in public policy, like you might be put on a project about mental health, or you might be put on a project about, you know, like sort of education or science or STEM. So nothing is wasted at all. So everything you sort of touch on and look at has been sort of relevant to me, where I can bring it up with the kids at school, I can bring it up sort of, you know, in my internship sometimes as well. I think for me, I remember a unit that I had to do for sociology. It was like a qualitative, quantitative data sort of unit, and I was like, oh, I just really like data and things like that. I was just like not very keen about, and we used Qualtrics quite a lot. And so I thought, oh my, when am I ever going to do this? In the project that I'm on right now with the Human Rights Commission, one of the main things I did was develop help out with their Qualtrics survey. And so if I hadn't done that unit, I wouldn't have had any idea how to use Qualtrics. So I kind of went in, I was like, I know this, been there, done that, you know? And so like, it was really helpful, and it was something that I thought, you know, it was a hard slog for me, that unit, but in the end it turned out to be one of the most helpful and the most like applicable ones as well. And also just like for me personally, forensic media was a really standout unit for me last semester, because I find as well, studying what I study, is that the assignments, you can bring what you're interested in and look at it in that lens. Like children, young people, refugees, human rights, I've always done my essay questions and I've always done my focus studies on things like that. Doesn't matter what unit I did, but I always sort of looked at those areas. And you could do the same if you like sort of filmmaking and things like that. You could take those units and just decide to do your assignments on those sort of areas instead. So I think the good thing about it is that all the units are great. You can just bring in what you enjoy. A lot of the time you can even talk to your tutor and go, hey, can I develop a question that's like more in the area that I'm interested in? And you can make the assignment so that it's more interesting, relevant, and aligns with your interests as well. So that would be my top tip for students is just whatever unit you do, you can make it sort of your own thing as well.
Exactly right. I've been in several units where there's been an option to not necessarily set your own question, but the tutor has made it clear that if you want to take this in a slightly different direction, email me and we'll make it work. It's not, no, I am the professional, I have set the assignment, this is what you must do all the time. Sometimes it is, but the fact is that there is space for you to make it more catered to your interests. And I think also interesting that you should bring up a unit that you had to slog through, because in academic life, you're not going to love every unit that you do. That's just statistics. I mean, I hate to bring stats into it, but you're not going to love everything. But the fact that doing that unit and pushing through it and just persisting, you came out the other end with knowledge that, again, has been surprisingly applicable. And I really liked what you mentioned, the fact that nothing you've learned has been a waste.
Yeah, nothing.
Even the stuff that was a pain to learn and the stuff that was a joy to learn. Nothing really goes in one ear, out the other. Not really. So I think that that's also a really valid point to be making. And also, I think that for me, just going back to the idea that we were mentioning earlier about giving everything your all, when you know that you're passionate about something, just really throwing yourself into it. When I started at university, when I was considering, if I had to specialize in my English major, what would it be? Well, I'm really into Shakespeare, so, I'll probably end up really focusing in on that and thinking like early modern literature, 17th century. And then one semester I did a class that was taught by Stephanie Russo, who just happens to be in the audience right now, called Popular Fiction. Now, I love fiction. Popular stuff, it's got to be popular for a reason. That was essentially what drew me to the unit. And then I did it, absolutely loved it. And what I came out the other end with was a totally different understanding about what I actually might want to specialize in. If I hadn't kind of just, this unit sounds cool, I'll do that. And it's also within my area of electives. I probably would still be sitting here telling you, I want to specialize in early modern literature, Shakespeare, like drama, stuff like that. Having taken that unit, I suddenly discovered that I'm intensely interested in the idea of genre, like I was mentioning before. And I hadn't really considered it in an academic sense as something more than just, a label you whack on a bookshelf in a bookstore to organize your literature. It's something that critically engages with the idea of reader expectation and textual evolution over time, and how a text can represent culture whilst also maintaining something that's recognizable through history. I hadn't really thought about it like that.
Yeah, and on that, something that you need to do as part of your MRes program, but something that I also did a bit before as part of my undergrad, is that departments will put on research seminars where your lecturers and the academics will talk about their recent or upcoming research. And I went to one that Karen Perlman put on about authorship, and that just shaped my interest so much. I was the only undergrad person there, but I sent her an email and I'm like, hey, have you got any research stuff coming up? Because I'm interested in what possibilities it has. And she's like, yes, here, come to this. So like, sometimes it might not quite be geared, but they'll know that and they'll let you know, and they'll love for you to come listen to them talk about their research. So just, it's never too early to start like situating yourself in those kind of circles where you're attending research seminars and just hearing people and talk about how they formulated their questions and how they did their research, things that you might not necessarily get from just reading it.
Yeah. Have you been in a similar situation where somebody, you were talking earlier about the academic who actually recommended you to this study, having not considered it yourself. Have you been in another similar situation where somebody said something, or you looked at something in a unit that you weren't expecting to have resonate with you, and then you stepped away from it and went, actually, okay, like have you been in a situation like that?
Yeah, I have been. There was one education unit that I did, once again, one of the ones that weren't my favorite at the time, and then there were things that I learned that I think about today. It was actually a language and literacy unit, and we looked at it, the things that we looked at, the first part was very linguistics, and then afterwards we started looking at how those linguistic components shaped like meaning. And so we looked at a children's book and referred to how a lot of the gender stereotypes in this children's book were that they were using terms like cooking, cleaning, playing. Everything was like a verb when referring to a female, and when referring to a male it was sort of just more static. And so it was just really interesting to me to see how text shape meaning and reflect society, and even socialize children, because ultimately, like in school, you spend the first 2 years in primary school learning to read, but then after that you're reading to learn. And so literature and like text and all that sort of stuff, really, it can be used to change societies as well. A lot of the time our text and stuff could revolutionize like an entire society and things like that. So that unit really made me appreciate and like understand like the importance of children's books. It's not just a picture book that you open up. It's so important. And now every time I go into the libraries and things like that and I open a text, I always go, oh my gosh, like I can see that like implicit sort of meaning and the little linguistics that they've used in it as well. So units like that have been just really interesting for me to just look at and see what's going on in the world.
Again, touching on that idea of interdisciplinary knowledge,
Yeah.
doing things that you're passionate about will also introduce you to the idea of being passionate about other things, potentially unrelated things, but also some related things. I think dealing, especially as we do, with such a broad range of disciplines within the MCCALL, like you've, again, media, communications, creative arts, languages, literature, that covers a big range of things. And I think that when you do units within this department, you are inviting that interdisciplinary knowledge. And that's so valuable because, like you were hinting at, it's able to shift your worldview, how you interact with what's around you. In something as trivial as a children's book, but is it actually that trivial? It just
exactly,
it really elevates how you interact with literature, with film, with policy, with anything like that. Now, I know that we are drawing towards the end of our time together, so we've spent a lot of time speaking about other people's work and how other people's work has been enlightening for us. Do you have any projects or things that you're working on at the moment that you'd like to share with us, Brooke?
At the moment, I'm in the process of shooting a little individual documentary that I'm just doing for fun and experimentation about a lot of the things going on in politics at the moment about trans kids. So I'm playing around with how I can represent that in certain ways on film, which then I'm just building repertoire for ways I can approach projects in the future, which is really fun. But yeah, no, mostly I'm focusing on just powering through my my MRes readings and just refining my interests. So just reading as much as I can on varied things I can. Being like, oh, I really like that. And just, figuring out what I'm going to spend the whole of next year writing about.
Exactly, because a personal project can be like a passion project, like the first example that you gave us. But it can also be making your work more personal to you. For example, you might read something about a particular theory or a particular subject that you go, actually, that's really interesting to me. I'm going to go and investigate what papers this paper sourced or what things this paper referenced, and I'm going to go and read more widely in that area because it's piqued my interest. So projects don't necessarily have to be like hard and fast, I'm creating this from scratch, although it's very cool when it is, and I think your idea sounds sensational and clearly very important to you, which is at the core of any good project, is it matters to its creator. But you can also apply that to your learning. If you discover something that you like and you want to pursue that further, well, I'm reticent to say there's nothing stopping you because time is not unlimited. But giving yourself permission to do that, I think, is also part of enriching your own learning. Now, Neilab, do you have any projects that you're working on at the moment?
One thing that I thought of as well is with Macquarie, they have their PACE unit, which is actually like jump on that PACE unit because you could get so much out of it. Like my Human Rights Commission internship is part of the unit media internship, and at first I was like, I applied for it, and then they sort of responded back and were like, oh, you need university insurance, and I was like, oh, I don't know how, and I sort of emailed Rachel Gunn, and I was like, hey Rachel, like I'm in a pickle, and she's like, well, you can do it under media internship, even though it doesn't sound like something you could do, I thought I could only do like journalism or radio or film-based stuff. She's like, no, you can do it under this and reflect on your internship as you go on as well. So that's something I'm doing at the moment, and then sort of just continuing working as like a teacher's aide in with a bunch of refugee students from Afghanistan, and I've got like Joseph gave me the opportunity to do a little piece for a journal article, so I'm doing that one's coming out soon as well, and I'm just trying to get through this degree and just try not to say yes to too many things, but do a bunch of things like that. So
Excellent. Well, now that we've touched on personal projects, I think the last thing that I would like to pick your brains about is, we've talked a lot about motivation and passion and throwing yourself into it and making yourself known and taking advantage of things that arise as a result of that. Is there anything else that you say you would say you've done to get where you are today? Like beyond just learning to the fullest capacity that you can learn, is there anything like some advice or insight that you'd had to do kind of outside of that, maybe outside of the university sphere, that helped you get where you are today with your studies? I notice you're nodding a lot, so I might go to you first, Neilab.
I think it's just like uni, I think the thing that I fell into my first year was just treating uni as like the main thing and just always just focusing on like assignments and things like that. Like that's important, but at the same time, you do learn so much from work experience and like being, I think for me, a lot of my degree changes came as a result of doing things outside of uni and like seeing people and experiencing things. So I think, you know, get out there and work and intern, and I did an internship at 2SER and I've done like random volunteering, and I'm with LEAP now as well, like as part of Macquarie University's sort of they go out and they mentor students from like refugee backgrounds in high school and to help them sort of with their career and getting to uni. So I think the biggest thing is just do stuff, like just keep moving. And it's more than just, I think uni is 50% of the equation. I think the other 50% is work experience and volunteering and all that sort of stuff, and interning and things like that. So don't hold back is what my thing is, and feel free to say yes and try things that you feel a bit uncomfortable about. So that would be my advice.
Fabulous. Absolutely excellent advice. Would you like to add anything, Brooke?
Just jumping on opportunities like that's so important. I'm in the really fortunate position where a lot of work experience and uni stuff overlap. Like, and it's just, those opportunities don't always just present themselves. A lot of it may look like in the right place at the right time, but you've got to get yourself to the right place. And whether that's through doing other things that build knowledge and skills, even if it's just, for example, with screen production, spending time at home, just like, because we get access to like LinkedIn Learning and that kind of stuff, whether it's like, I'm going to go through and do this editing software course on that, and it's just building those skills that you can then show off in your classes, which will then just build you up as a valuable team member and co-worker to your teachers and classmates.
So taking advantage of opportunities when they arise, but also putting yourself in a better position to be receptive to opportunities, taking the time to build your personal skill set as well. I think both of those are really, really valuable pieces of advice and put you in equivalent positions but in slightly different ways, and I think that's really interesting. I think also for me, something that has enriched my learning is jumping into community as well. Again, it's not always something that presents itself, like it doesn't always feel like your tutorial class is going to be, you know, your friendship group for the rest of your time at university. But there are other aspects of university outside of academia which enable you to build community. And a lot of those for me have been student groups and student societies, because you can study what you like and you can meet people who are like-minded through those channels, or you can pursue passions that you have to do with performing arts, sports, social justice, drama, theatre, religion, stuff like that, and find like-minded people through those channels. And it's been interesting to see how many people I've met by partaking, for me personally, in the drama and musical theatre societies. You meet so many people from such diverse backgrounds. You all automatically have something in common because you all chose to front up to the student society, but you'd be surprised how many people I've met who are studying similar things to me, or who are slightly further along in their academic journey than where I am, but I want to be somewhere where they are. So you get the opportunity to pick their brains. What units did you study last year? Oh, I've studied that one. I'm about to study that one. You did it last year. Tell me about it. You can build experience, and you can also build community, which then can guide your academic decisions. So uni is about study, but it's also about work experience. It's also about realizing that, I personally want to go and do this thing to enrich my time at university. And it's also about building community and friendship and indulging your passions in the classroom and also outside of it. And I think that for me has been the most invigorating thing about the panel today, is that I've seen the passion in both of you as you've been talking. You know, it's not just, oh, I can provide insight because I'm X amount of years into my degree and I'm doing this because, I know it's good for me. It is vivacious. Truly, it is vivacious to see how interested you are in your studies and how you're interested in pursuing them further. Now, I do believe that a quick time check will tell me that we are about 4 minutes away from the conclusion of our panel. So I do want to quickly turn to our audience. Is there a question that you would like answered from our panelists or myself? Yes, my apologies for the 4-minute time limit.
I can ask a question. If you had to give, you sort of touched on this already, but maybe we could be really specific about advice for first-year students. If you had to give one piece of advice to a first-year student, it's their second week of university ever, what would that be?
All right.
Brooke. Learn how to, with your readings, instead of just reading them and taking notes, learn how to come up with questions that interest you, that you can then ask, because that's where you'll find the interest and display passion. So whether it's figuring out a new note-taking system or just practicing coming up with questions and just seeing where it leads, but just never leave it at this is the content. Always be thinking, what can I do with this? What did this inspire within me? Can I apply this somewhere else? Just that constant, something that Kirsten Mills, the MRes director, has been saying a lot, is the growth mindset. Everything is there to build you up, and just practice making it work for you.
Yeah, nice. More of a more active learning approach. Excellent. Neilab?
Mine, looking at myself as a first, I would just say relax, just chill.
Yeah.
Because I think my second week of my first year I was just freaking out. I was just like, what have I done? This is my life. This is it. It's not the be all end all. And I think just it's just relax and look after yourself and just sort of take it as it comes. You might finish the semester and it's the best thing ever. It might be the worst thing ever. You might not even, you might be like this. Actually, I don't really like this. I thought it was going to be something I really wanted to do. It's not for me. It's okay to change. I think it's just sort of relax, sort of take it as it comes. It's all right to shuffle things around, change things around, do something else, get work experience, take a break from uni and come back. I think just first and foremost, relax, look after yourself. Because I think the thing about uni students is that we're all, a lot of us, when you're an undergrad, you're 17, 18, fresh out of sort of high school. You're in, you're just sort of growing and you're going through being a teenager and a young adult. And I think that next to trying to figure out what you want to do with your life is also quite a challenge. So I think just sort of take it as it comes and look after yourself and have fun and just sort of relax, because I think a lot of sort of high achieving students might look at this video and try and look for an answer, and I think the one thing I would say is just relax and get help if you need to get help, because there's always, whether that's sort of socially or academically or mental health wise, there's a lot of help at uni. It's more than just walking to your tutorials and your career and things like that. So I think that would be my biggest piece of advice.
Looking after your personal well-being as a student as well. Your identity as a student is more than just what you submit for your assignments.
Exactly.
It's about how you feel in the classroom and how you feel thinking about what you're studying, and that starts with you. So I think that's really, really valuable insight. So take an active, invested approach to your studies, but also realize that personal well-being is key to success in all of those areas. And I think that my piece of advice harkens back to what we were talking about earlier about tutorial participation, is activate your learning style early. So start making comments in tutorials now. Start turning on your camera now. Start putting up your hand now. Even if it's walking up to your tutor after the end of the class and saying, thank you for the lesson, I really enjoyed this one thing. Or, oh, thanks for today, I was really interested in this. Or, thanks, I didn't expect it to go in this direction. start that now, because you don't want to be at week 4 or 5 or 6, approaching the mid-semester break going, how am I going to get my participation grade? Because then that's the wrong sort of impetus for you to start that. If you start that now, then that will become a habit more organically for you over time. So start activating your learning now, and then you'll realize what works for you much sooner than if you'd put it off and oh no, I'm just here to do my readings and blah. So yes, so to revise our 3 pieces of advice, take a more active, invested approach to your learning. It's never just there for me to read and answer questions for what questions can I ask to build my learning experience. Also, listen to yourself. Appreciate that personal well-being is behind academic success as well. You can't really have one without the other in a sustainable sense. And also, take an active approach to your learning in the classroom and in terms of seeking out that community and that rapport with your tutors and your academics early. Start that now. And I think that's really invaluable advice for first year students, and certainly stuff that I would have thought was brilliant to hear as a ready, raring to go first university student. I'm here, I'm ready, but I've got no idea what to do. And I think that's really, really valuable for guiding that experience. So thank you. Thank you for contributing your expertise, and I do believe that has brought us to the conclusion of our panel. So I just wanted to say thank you again to our fabulous panelists, Brooke and Neilab. Thank you for sharing your insight and for sharing your excitement and your projects, and I wish you both the best of luck going forth with your postgraduate studies, wrapping up your undergraduate and then going into your postgraduate studies. It's a very exciting time. So thank you for your time today, and thank you for sharing your thoughts with our audience, both in person and online. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.